Well, we're joined now by Afif Safieh, who is the former Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Russia, the Netherlands, and also the person who was the head of the PLO mission to the United States. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, Ambassador. I just want to start by asking you, President Trump has been expressing some optimism about the diplomatic efforts underway in Sharm el-Sheikh. And I wanted to find out from you whether you share that sense of optimism.
Let me surprise you. I, for one, personally, I hope sincerely that President Trump will earn during his second mandate the Nobel Peace Prize. Not this Friday, not this year, because he hasn't deserved it yet. But let me offer him a piece of advice, a policy recommendation. We need to see him do and emulate the Eisenhower moment, meaning statesmanship and American leadership. You know, Eisenhower, after the 1956 tripartite aggression against Egypt, when Israel occupied the Sinai, with one phone call, he got Israel to withdraw out of the Sinai. And Ben Gurion, then the prime minister, was a roaring lion. Netanyahu, compared to Ben Gurion, is a lamb. I personally believe that the international community expects the American administration to play a very assertive, dynamic role, not only in stopping the aggression now on Gaza Strip, but ending the Israeli-Palestinian, the Israeli-Arab conflict in its entirety. And I believe, sir, that President Trump would be well advised if he was reminded of the Saudi peace initiative of 2002, which was adopted by the entire Arab system, the 22 Arab states, then was adopted by the entire Islamic states, the 57 of them. And he should know that today the Islamic states, the Arab states, no more challenge Israeli existence, but Israeli expansion of 1967. And they expect the withdrawal of Israeli occupation out of the 67 expansion and are ready to recognize Israeli existence and normalize with it. And I believe that President Trump, who is very keen on the issue of normalization, should understand that Israeli security does not come from territorial aggrandizement, but from regional acceptance. And he should know that we, the Palestinians, are the key for the regional acceptance of Israel. I believe we should be expecting more from the American administration beyond the cessation of the carnage and the slaughter of Gaza. We would expect from him a dynamic role towards peace in the Middle East.
Okay, well, that is... Yeah, I mean, his immediate priority is to put a stop to what is now a more than 2-year-long war in Gaza.
But I cannot conceal my disappointment that he has called publicly on Netanyahu 5 days ago to stop bombing the Gaza Strip. And up to now, Netanyahu has been the reluctant player, continuing with his bombardment, indiscriminate bombardment in the Gaza Strip. Yet, I think the international community expects the cessation of hostilities in Gaza, the liberation of the Israeli captives and Palestinian prisoners, and the entry of the humanitarian aid. And I believe we should then go beyond that with a more ambitious plan, which is peace in the Middle East, beyond the 20 points that were presented by President Trump during his press conference with Netanyahu.
Okay, so in terms of where we are now and those 20 points that are under discussion in Egypt, it's been reported that Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, who is, of course, President Trump's son-in-law, arrived in Sharm el-Sheikh this morning. This afternoon, Ron Dermer, he is Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister, arrived. Does that look to you like signs of progress in the talks?
I would like to wait and see, but I would like to also to say that the American administration will be well advised to abandon this bad habit of nominating pro-Israelis from America as the mediators in the Middle East conflict. This was not helpful during the Clinton years, where the entire team for peacemaking was made of members of the pro-Israeli lobby in Washington. And today, Witkoff and Kushner, I don't know them personally, but they are hardly seen as people who would be inclined to be even-handed. But anyway, let's keep our hopes high and let's keep our expectations high. I believe that the world, the entire international community, expects them to have a breakthrough. I believe that on the Palestinian and Arab and Muslim sides, they have been all forthcoming. It's Israeli reluctance, it's the stubbornness of Mr. Netanyahu, who unfortunately has succeeded in torpedoing previous efforts for 2 years. He has torpedoed many an effort, and I'm hopeful that this time it might work in the first phase. But Israel has to take a commitment to start withdrawing out of the Gaza Strip. There is no need for them to remain in the Gaza Strip. They know they have the military capability of reoccupying it if they so desired, and if not impeded by the international community. So I will keep my expectations high for a breakthrough on the cessation of violence in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, well, I mean, there is a new dimension to these talks, which is different from other talks, in that President Trump managed to get the Turkish to take part. Turkey's spy master, Ibrahim Kalin, is there as well. And I'm just wondering whether you think that makes a big difference, having Turkey represented at those talks, because presumably the logic is they exert influence over Hamas.
Look, during the last 4 decades in the Middle East, we had 3 major players. It was Israel, Turkey, and Iran. Unfortunately, there was no Arab player in this region, which is of extreme importance to the world. I believe that today, with Saudi Arabia showing an appetite to play a more dynamic role in international relations and in regional relations, and I believe that if there is more coordination between Saudi Arabia and Egypt, the Arab world will be better represented on the international arena. Now, Turkey's presence is not unimportant because they have influence on Hamas, and they might play a constructive role, yes, of course. And I believe they already have signaled to Hamas that it would be wise for them to contemplate in the future to create a new Hamas movement under a different appellation, and to coordinate better with the other factions of the Palestinian national movement, and mainly with Fatah, the PA, and the PLO. I believe that the PLO can offer a safe haven, political safe haven, to Hamas, who are not going to be eliminated, neither ideologically nor physically. And I believe that it would be wise for Hamas to reintegrate the PLO umbrella under a new appellation in the future. And that was the advice from Turkey, which I believe is extremely wise.
Okay, it's being reported that some deep gaps remain between the two sides in these negotiations. I mean, that's not surprising, is it, given the intensity of the conflict and the grave mistrust, I think it's fair to say, between the two sides. I mean, what do you think those deep gaps are likely to be? What do you think the key sticking points will be at this stage?
Well, there is no clear formulation for the total withdrawal of the Israelis in the coming weeks, and their presence in Gaza is totally unnecessary and unhelpful. But the most important thing is that once we get the ceasefire and we get humanitarian aid and the liberation of the captives and Palestinian prisoners, I believe we should be more ambitious in our diplomatic pursuit. I personally believe that the objectives of the 20-point program are very minimalistic. And here I would like to say that the American input is of extreme importance. And here I would expect President Trump to be more even-handed in dealing with the issue in the Middle East. You know, America is a fascinating society. It's a nation of nations, and every possible country, continent, and culture is represented within American ranks. And I personally believe that America is a dominant player in the international system, and it would be well advised to adopt non-alignment in regional conflicts in the future, and mainly in the Middle East, because aligning itself on one belligerent party in a regional conflict not only alienates and offends all the other players in the region, but it also offends part of the domestic national fabric of American society. It wasn't easy to be a Palestinian American during the last decades because of the insensitivity of the country of adoption vis-à-vis the problems of the country of origin. And there are 500,000 Palestinian Americans, and one of them today has won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry, by the way, a Palestinian American from Berkeley University. And it wasn't easy to be an Arab American, and there are 4 million of those. It wasn't easy to be a Muslim American in American society. So I believe that American non-alignment in regional conflicts is a wise course of action to be adopted and pursued. And by the way, I still remember that in 2014, 2015, when President Trump was running for the primaries of the Republican Party during his first quest for the White House, he spoke for a short period of America neutral in the Middle East. Unfortunately, and he won several primaries with that objective being approached. Then he was embraced by the Christian evangelicals and with their delirious theology, and he was embraced by some kleptomaniac pro-Israeli oligarchs, and he then changed the tune. I would advise him to go back to his original plan of American neutrality in regional conflicts, and this will earn him a deserved Nobel Peace Prize if ever he helps in the birth of a Palestinian state. I believe the international community today is saying the following: there is either one people too many in the Middle East, this time we the Palestinians, or there is a state which is missing and needs to be created. I believe America can make the difference by changing the attitude adopted today in Washington.
Okay, and in terms of what we might see achieved in the next couple of days, I mean, lots has been happening. Hamas has submitted a list of the prisoners it wants to see freed. Obviously, the Israelis want their hostages freed, 20 of whom are believed to be alive. Do you anticipate that to happen in one phase, or do you think there'll be a phased release of those surviving hostages?
It depends on what would be the Israeli attitude. The Israelis up to now haven't said who are the prisoners they are ready to liberate. And as you know, we have 12,000 prisoners in horrible conditions that have not seen the representatives of the Red Cross for months and months at length, because the Israelis prevent the Red Cross of having access to Palestinian prisoners. Most of them are there in administrative detention with no trial and no court hearings, etc. And they have been maltreated. I have seen pictures of prisoners when they were imprisoned, and prisoners as they are today. They are a skeleton of what they used to be because of deprivations. And Ben Gvir, the minister in charge of prisons, is all the time boasting on how he is punishing them on a daily basis by malnourishment and torture and all the rest. So much depends on how the Israelis will be reciprocating. Hamas has announced that it is ready to free the captives they hold. They might need some time for those who unfortunately have died in the meantime, probably due to Israeli indiscriminate bombardment in the Gaza Strip. But those who are alive, I believe they are ready to free them, depending on how the Israelis free Palestinian prisoners, either by installment or in one block. I hope for the speediest possible operation on both sides with reciprocity and seriousness. And here again, American pressure on the Israelis is not unwelcome.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, in terms of what provisions the 20-point plan makes for an eventual Palestinian state, I mean, it is quite vague, the document. It doesn't spell anything out clearly, but people we've spoken to have said that the simplicity of this document is possibly its greatest asset. I'm just wondering how likely you think it is that once these 20 points are ironed out, that, you know, real efforts can be made towards the establishment of a Palestinian state. I mean, is that something you see happening in the years ahead?
Let me tell you, the feeling of diplomats around the world is that this 20-point program is very poorly written. And Kissinger had fabricated the concept of constructive ambiguity, and we all discovered that there are no constructive ambiguities. Ambiguities are usually unconstructive. and I am in favor of diplomatic clarity. First of all, I want to remind you that, unfortunately, the 20 points read by Mr. Trump in the press conference were different from the 21 points that were submitted to the Arab and Muslim leaders whom he had met a few days earlier in New York. And this document was rewritten after meetings between Netanyahu and Witkoff and Kushner. This is why I said we should abandon the bad habit of having American mediators belonging to the pro-Israeli lobby. That's not fair at all. And many today in America believe, even including within the Republican ranks, that unfortunately in the Israeli-American relation, it's the tail that is wagging the dog and not the dog wagging the tail. So my personal hope is that once we achieve the cessation of hostilities in Gaza and the liberation of captives and prisoners and the massive arrival of humanitarian aid, we need to redraft the remaining points, and maybe another meeting between Trump and the Arab and Muslim leaders by Zoom, not necessarily physically, maybe might be necessary for the clarification of the steps further. And I personally believe, as a Palestinian, the link between Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem should be maintained. It's a cornerstone of the Oslo agreements, which we have signed in the White House in 1993. It spoke of territorial integrity of the Palestinian Authority with both wings, the West Bank and Gaza, belonging to the same emerging entity. I personally believe that today the Jewish public opinion in America is extremely important and is evolving in a very constructive manner. Many, and you have seen it on TV, many in Washington and New York have demonstrated by saying not in our name. An opinion poll that I read in the Jewish media says that 40% of the American Jews believe that there is a genocide being committed in Gaza. I believe that all those factors are encouraging, promising, constructive for the future. And there is a convergence that will be occurring in the coming days and weeks between those who want to liberate Palestinian territories occupied by Israel and those who want to liberate Israel of its occupied territories, because they are familiar and aware of the moral corrosion and the moral erosion that the occupation is occasioning in Jewish Israeli society. And in America, I know for a fact that the American community is becoming increasingly embarrassed by the Israeli behavior in the Middle East. And I believe they were always in the forefront for human rights and civil rights. And for 50 years, they have been expected by Israel to defend the indefensible, the unbearable. And the last 2 years were really unbearable, including for them. I always say a message to the Jewish communities around the world that a Palestinian state is our right, we the Palestinians, but it's a moral duty and ethical obligation for Jewish communities around the world, because they, more than anybody else, know the price, the human price that we collectively and individually had to pay so that Israel can be carved in the Middle East. And we were expelled then to the periphery of our homeland. Today, we are unreasonably reasonable. We are in favor of the two-state solution, which was the international consensus. And I believe that, unfortunately, during the previous peace process from 1993 onwards, instead of seeing and witnessing Israeli withdrawal from occupation, what we have witnessed was the expansion of occupation through the elastic growth of the illegal settlements. All this should stop. We're aware of the internal blockages within Israeli society forward. And many were saying to the Israelis and to the Americans that America gives Israel a lot of aid and some advice. Up to now, Israel takes all the aid and leaves the advice aside.
Okay.
I hope that President Trump will tell the Israelis, you can have the aid only if you also took the advice, and that he will give them wise advice.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Afif Safieh, former Palestinian ambassador. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir.